Are you sitting there right now using a PC with an overpriced operating system while you eat unhealthy ramen? Well, I apparently have all of the solutions to your life. Go to Vite Ramen right now and get their healthy protein-filled ramen for 10% off with offer code BrokenSilicon. And then go to cdkeyoffer.com to get 25% off all Windows keys and use Die Shrink to get 3% off everything else on the website. And we'll talk about these sponsors more later. But for now, let's just get on with the show. And welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, hot off the plane, Tom. And today I'm joined by my co-host.
Just out of the forest, Dan, I guess.
That works. I mean, you were in a forest. I was in a plane today. I was not in a forest. There was no forest for, I don't know, hundreds of, well,
Probably
I guess
not.
No, there was like a river we saw from the airplane. And there's like a tiny little forest next to it or something, you know, in Las Vegas, which is where I was this weekend for a friend's bachelor party and joint bachelorette party with his fiance. So that was a good time. But I've literally not even been home 15 minutes. You know, I just prepared the script on the plane. It was like a 3-hour flight. And then.
Well, gotta grind, bro.
You got to grind it out, man. But yeah, I will say having the Minis 4 and V3 at this point, it was a godsend to work on the airplane, both on the way there and back compared to before. It's just the difference between 14 and 16 inches on an airplane is enormous, actually. Like how easy and how much you're actually typing like this versus just like.
Oh yeah, I know. That's one of the things I've always hated about big laptops is they're very hard to work with, and they kind of just turn into desktops at a certain point, but they are slightly more mobile. And also the terrible battery life is the other thing I tend to not like about them. But
well, yeah, and I think when it comes to battery life, it's just something like it didn't charge overnight, so it only had like 60% battery. And it's just like, whatever, I've got a power bank that I plugged into it, and I was able to work at full brightness, actually at full overclocked mode for the entire time without even coming close to losing battery, even though I started from a lower point, because almost any power bank can charge it. That difference is just absolutely massive, honestly.
Yeah, bruh.
But go on.
And I'm fresh out of the forest because I was going morel hunting today.
Which you're trying to train your dog, who is a hound, to be a little truffle pig to find morel mushrooms.
Yes, I've got her trained to pick them out of, like, if I like set a couple around a yard, she can find them pretty easily. But she kind of just stops after she finds one or two because she's like, I found the mushrooms, Dan. What?
How many mushrooms could you possibly want?
You're supposed to put them back out again. That's the game.
Right, because she knows what they smell like. She knows to find them. But from her perspective, the game is Dan hides a morel, I find it, not keep going.
Yeah, so I need to figure out how to break her out of that one. I mean, I'm kind of just doing this on my own. I've never trained a dog to do this before, so I guess if anybody has advice, I'm open to it.
Well, the best advice I can give right now is to actually get on with the episode. Crass writes in. He says, a few episodes ago, you and Dan were riffing on the topic of milestone episodes like Broken Silicon 256. So that's this one. I think Broken Silicon 256 is more of an interesting milestone than the previous one, not just because it's a multiple of 64, which you guys seem to like, but also because 256 is the first episode number that cannot fit in a single byte. It's also a very round number, 100 in hexadecimal. Starting your second byte should have the same satisfying feeling as noticing when a car's odometer rolls over from a bunch of nines to a number ending in all zeros.
And I think it should be noted that our next equivalent milestone is episode 65,536 when we reach 2 bytes.
Right, which we will get to, of course, eventually, as we will be
Oh yes, I'm sure.
cryogenically frozen when we
You-
first can, and then just rebooted once, only when we need to record an episode every weekend, so that in reality, we are only living a third of the life, and we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll be heads in a jar like the presidents in Futurama.
Or we could just do that too, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, we usually celebrate every 64 episodes, every anniversary, and every 100 a little bit. But I think the anniversary episode is where we're probably going to celebrate the most, because that's just in a month from now. And it's an anniversary that will be what? It'd be our five.
5? Yeah, 5.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So that's exciting, though.
Yeah, it is, bro.
Think about what we were doing in 2019. I still had a other job I was doing. You were still in college, and we were excited when a episode of Broken Silicon hit 10,000 views.
And now we would be worried if it only hit 10,000.
We would be a bit worried if it did, yes. Especially if it was a main episode with you, like a standard one. But yeah, I know. Thanks for writing in, Crass. Of course, we got to acknowledge we just hit 256, which is crazy. I don't know what's the. I suppose the next one, 320, would be fun. 384. We'll pay some homage to that. 512. After that, the bit kind of stops working well, I guess, until 1024.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem, is we've decided that our milestone grows exponentially. So we're going to have to figure out a new one at some point, I think. I guess we could just continue celebrating every 64 episodes, but it starts to make less sense at those.
It starts to look more and more random every time. I don't know. Maybe we'll just celebrate every year anniversary and every 100th episode like a normal podcast.
Maybe.
All right. Well, speaking of being a normal podcast, let us do what we claim our podcast is about and get to the news over the past 2 weeks with story number 1. Laptop Blackwell configurations leaked, updates given to desktop launch. Last week, this channel put out a quick update on Nvidia Blackwell that actually has some fairly large implications for future gamers, despite its brevity. In summary, at least the RTX 5090 should be announced at Computex, which for everyone keeping track is just a month from now. And there's even some suggestion by some of my sources that it could paper launch before Q4, although any real launch or notable volume still, the overall consensus isn't expected until very early Q4 at this point. There remains some apprehension as well to being if we should be sure that the RTX 5080 will launch this year. Personally, I'm just saying my gut feeling, I feel like they're at least going to paper launch the 5080 this year in like December or something, or maybe sooner. But technically, at this point, I still have some really good long-term sources that are warning that from what they are hearing, it still may not launch. So I wouldn't double down on that and quite yet, despite the buzz around there right now. And then the more important stuff, I think, both the RTX 5090 and RTX 5080 laptop configurations are now confirmed to use a 256-bit bus with 16 gigabytes of RAM. This was further confirmed in a live stream at the end of last week after the initial leak. And in said live stream, it was also confirmed that the card below the RTX 5080 or 5080 Ti, I wouldn't, right? Because they might just go 5090, 5080 Ti, 16 gigabyte. Whatever's below that, though, is going to have 12 gigabytes. Could that be actually called the 5080? Could that actually be the one that's called the 5070 Ti? The people I talk to think that might be called a laptop 5070 Ti. I don't know. But it's still interesting to note that technically the third card down this time will have 12 gigabytes, unlike 8 gigabytes before. And unfortunately, card below that, though, still 8 gigabytes, still 128-bit. I would suggest then this all but confirms the RTX 5060 will be an 8 gigabyte card, again, at least at first. And so there you go. Based on several NVIDIA sources, it seems that only the top gaming Blackwell die is 100% confirmed to be launching in the next 5 months. And NVIDIA is increasing VRAM capacity in the upper laptop GPUs, but also still limiting how much VRAM they truly give to gamers across the board compared to AMD. Will this cocky attitude towards the middle of the market be punished by RDNA 4, by consumers buying it up? I don't know. Hard to say, but it is interesting to compare Lovelace to Pascal in some regards, because with the 5090 potentially launching first, long before any other upgrades in a similar generation, you could almost compare the 5090 to the Titan Volta if that's what ends up happening, whereby NVIDIA neglects the majority of their lineup for an extended period of time in order to milk the high end and coast. All right, so I thought this was actually, although it kind of came out of nowhere when I put out this information, pretty big news, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 5090 coming out and maybe the 5080 and there just being a long gap before they release anything else kind of makes sense, though. Because I don't think the rest of their lineup, I think they can just keep selling Lovelace below the 5080. I mean, I don't think there's really any need in the market for anything below that right now, because at a certain point, they're just going to have 3 generations of stuff they're still trying to sell through if Ampere is still having issues selling through, which
I expect it to still be fairly the 3060s and 3050s widely available well into the middle of next year.
Which that might not be really a problem. The 3060 and 3050 could just be their long-term low-end cards, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I think 40 or the entire Lovelace series is fine to complement whatever the 5080 and 5090 will be. And yeah, we'll see what the 5090 does, because it might just be so far and above everything else that, like, I'm curious how much interest there will be in it, or if the 4090 pretty much satiated most people with how powerful they need their GPUs to be.
Well, yeah, because this is something we even talked about a lot, actually, like a couple of years ago, like through all 2023. I seem to remember me and you talking about like this idea of like, I know NVIDIA thinks Lovelace should sell well because it is a bigger uplift than Ampere was. I mean, Ampere is about a 50% performance uplift. Lovelace was a near doubling of performance over the last generation. And again, everyone listening to this, they never launched the 4090 Ti. That'd be another at least 20. The 4090 is more cut down than the 3090 was. They could add another 25% right now if they wanted, and that's how you would get to almost double the 3090 Ti's performance. Like, I think they thought because this was a larger uplift than before overall, that, well, that must mean that it would dictate it's going to do really well. But it's like, well, but if everybody bought RDNA 2 and Ampere, it could almost triple performance. And there's a lot of people that would say, I've already upgraded, right? And it'll be interesting to see, you know, a lot of people bought the 4090 for obvious reasons. It'll be interesting to see if that happens even more so next generation, where obviously the richest of the rich will buy the 5090 if they want it. But I don't know. I can say myself that I was excited for the 4090 because it got to that level of insane performance we've all been waiting for. I kind of have zero interest in the 5090 for myself. I'm excited to see what it can do, but I myself don't have that much. It's not like the 4090 where I'm like, ooh, maybe I'll spoil myself this year. It's like, I don't think I need anything else right now.
Although I will say that's what you're saying right now. Who knows what happens when the 5090 comes out? Maybe it will be legitimately impressive. Well, I'm sure it will be legitimately impressive. But yeah, I just don't know if the demand is there unless they come out with like DLSS 4.0 and it's magic or something.
Falter writes in, and he says, will the next DLSS likely be Blackwell exclusive? Or will Lovelace owners benefit from it too? Or what about the super solution, 4th gen DLSS versus frame gen, 2nd gen aspect? I believe they are separate. Oh yeah, like, and could just one of them be exclusive to the next generation? I don't know. From my perspective, this is what I wrote ahead of time. The launch, if the launch cadence of Blackwell is incredibly drawn out, which I wouldn't say we're 100% sure how drawn out it will be. It kind of sounds guaranteed that the mid-range of Blackwell is not coming for a while, but we'll see. Like, if the 5090 comes out, let's say July, and then the 5080 comes out December or January, and then they announce the 5070 and 5070 Ti coming out like middle of next year, and then the 5060 is holiday next year. If that's how drawn out the generation is, I would think it would be pointless to make DLSS 4 next gen exclusive, because no one will own it, unlike otherwise. Kind of. That's what I think. But at the same time, I can't promise you they won't. And if they do it, I would say from now on, we should assume every 2 years there will be a new generation, a new DLSS, and you'll have to buy the new generation to use it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would behoove them to not do that if it's like physically possible for them to have DLSS 4 on compatible with their previous gens, because One, Nvidia always has an issue of kind of looking like a shyster in a lot of ways, and then just to agree with the other point you made, like, well, most of your people, your market is still buying the last gen thing, so giving a new feature will drive people to buy it. So I do think it's just from a business perspective good for them too.
Yeah. I mean, and I have to assume they've got a lot of Lovelace lying around. I think it would behoove them launch the 5090 as soon as possible, give as much volume as you deem we're worthy of, I guess, Jensen. Announce DLSS 4.0, and then just give it to everyone if you can, as much as you can, so that Lovelace sells through and then put out the rest of the generation. Because from what I'm hearing right now, it does sound like Blackwell's like all 4 nanometer. It's just, better. So there's really no reason to keep making Lovelace at all, actually. Compared to like with the Ampere, you could argue, well, yeah, but it uses Samsung. It's a cheaper node. Spitting out all those 3060s, you could almost argue might work out as long as they handle it well. I mean, give it to everyone so people keep buying Lovelace and then introduce Blackwell. But otherwise, yeah, again, unless they can make the choice, I don't see why you would hold it. Yeah. Unless this is just what they're doing now, right?
Yeah.
Unless they're like just telling you, we're always going to do this, get used to it.
Yeah, and I just think that's a confusing decision for a couple reasons that they do decide to do that.
All right. Vise writes in, and he says, hello, Tom and Dan. How much VRAM and bus width do you expect the glorious leader Jensen Wang to give us on the lower tier Blackwell cards like the 5070? Interesting, now he's calling the 5070 lower tier. Will we be stuck with 12 gigabytes again? And when I say stuck, I mean graced with the benevolent splendor of 12 gigabytes, of course. Well, I mean, I think I think in desktop, we'll have to see. I mean, I guess there's several questions I want to ask you, Dan. Let's go here. So do you think they will give the 5070 16 gigabytes, like use 1203 for the 5070 on desktop? Or do you think they're going to just like call it the 5070 Ti with 16 and then have the 5070 still be the die below that?
I mean, I think based on the laptop, what we've talked about with laptops, it seems like they're at least their mid-range, they're going up, at least in their laptop segments, up a tier with RAM. I mean, I don't know if that really can speak anything to what their desktop approach will be, but I hope, I mean, if the 4080 Super is based off of the same, I mean, not 4080 laptop is based off of the 5080 laptop is based off of the same die as like the 5070. I think there will be a good chance that it's 16 gig cards also.
You mean 5090?
Yeah, sorry, Jesus. Yeah. If they're based off the same die, I think that there's a pretty good chance that something like the 5070 would be 16 gigabytes. If not, then yeah.
So you're suggesting
gigabyte again.
What they would do is 5090, I don't know, 2500 gets the biggest bus they decide to give it, a ton of RAM. Below that, 256-bit, which I can confirm is 203 now, everybody, myself. Okay. 203 is 256-bit. They give that to the 5080, and then you think they just have a 5070 below it that's 256-bit? Because there's just a part of me that goes, I don't fucking think they're going to do that. I think they're going to call it the 5070 Ti and charge $800 or something. Because
I mean, I think
unless they want to call the 5070 a $800 card or something, which I just don't know they're going to do that either.
Yeah, what's probably more likely is that they're going to hold the line and say the 5070 still doesn't get 12 gigabytes of RAM and they give the Ti 16 gigabytes of RAM or something like that. As the mid-tier slowly degrades to being entry level, because that's, if we're being honest, what's happening. Like the 60 from Nvidia, we've talked about this a billion times. The 60 from class card from Nvidia used to be viewed as like the mid-range card. Now I think it's generally viewed as the low-end card.
I mean, it is, yeah.
Well, I mean, is there going to be a 4050? I don't know. Maybe there will be really late in the generation, but as it stands right now, the 4060 is the lowest-end card that they sell with their new lineup.
Besides on laptop.
Well, yeah, of course.
But, so here's a question, though. Do you think there's a chance what NVIDIA might do, though, is, GB203 gets full or near full. Full or near full GB203 is what the 5080 uses. And then I think maybe they'll do 5070 Ti out of the gate with 16 gigabytes. Do you think there's a chance they would take I don't know. I think the rumor is that it's called 205, and they would use 205 with the 5070 and 5060. Now that I'm saying it out loud, no. I think they use that for the 5060 Ti, 12 gigabyte.
Yeah, probably.
It's just, well, I guess this is where I want to get to the one of the main conversations I want to have here is like I leaked all of this stuff. I kind of focused on the 5070 Ti 12 gigabyte in the live stream I put out Friday. But, I think the big thing to talk about on this is the fact that they're really possibly fucking giving the 5060 8 gigabytes again. And I'm just going to say it, guys, I'm not recommending an 8 gigabyte card above like 150 this year. Or by the end of this year, I should say. Certainly not next year when this would actually come out. Because that's what we think about this. The 5060 is coming out next year, everybody. So in 2025, I will not recommend an 8 gigabyte card above, I don't know, $200, $150. I mean, in my testing of that Hawkpoint laptop, it was just hilarious. Like the amount of times, even when we're talking about like 3.5 teraflop Rembrandt APUs, giving it enough RAM gives it just a flat 20-30% performance boost. I mean, I just tested the RX 7600 XT 16 gigabyte, and I found in games, even where I tried to minimize VRAM, like it's not really enough above 1080p. Even in 1440p with like high settings, there were just flat 20% performance boost sometimes with these 16 gigabyte 7600 XT. So I just don't know how they could sell this anymore. Like this can't call it, and that's where I go, just dude, call it the 5050 and just get the 5060 12 gigabytes, charge 400, whatever. But like, it's just ridiculous.
I mean, it is. I think, I mean, it all depends, I guess, on the bus of the whatever model whatever die they're using. But yeah, I mean, Nvidia is always stingy with RAM. I mean, I think the laptop leaks suggest that maybe they'll be a bit less stingy in places in their lineup next generation, but I don't know how much you can say that will translate to the desktop market or the desktop graphics cards. So, yeah, I mean,
but you agree, like just blanket not recommend buying in 2025. I mean,
yeah, I would. Of course, I wouldn't recommend it, but I'm just holding out hope, I guess, that the 5060 has 12 or even 16 gigabytes of RAM, but 16 gigabytes is probably pretty unlikely.
Well, it is funny to think about that. Is it entirely implausible, in your opinion, Dan, that we could see on desktop next year, again, like 16 gigabyte 5080, 16 gigabyte 5070 Ti, 12 gigabyte 5070, 12 gigabyte 5060 Ti, 16 gigabyte 5060.
Who knows?
I mean, it'd be so stupid, but
maybe they'll repeat that same goofy mistake.
It just seems to happen every generation now.
Yeah, I know. It's just the design philosophy Nvidia has for their lower end dies just always creates that weird situation where they have to give the lower die more RAM because everybody complains about it, and then it makes one of their higher end cards look stupid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hopefully they'll learn about what comes after that. All right, and then the other thing I wanted to bring up is, how do you feel about what might happen in laptop at a minimum with whatever it's going to be, but let's call it the 5070 Ti 12 gigabyte competing against a 16 gigabyte 8800M XT? Because, yeah, I mean, I would estimate that the 5070 Ti 12 gigabyte laptop edition, I'm trying to think of like exactly where I would place this thing, because I expect the 5080 to be like 20% better than the 4090 on desktop, which means a cut down one, probably around a little weaker than a 4090. And then if I remove 30%, so yeah, you'd be looking at 4070 Ti super performance. That's about the same as the 8800. Yeah, it's Navi 48. So do you think that will make a difference for AMD in laptop next year? The fact that they'll have Strix Halo, which will be weaker but have tons more RAM, but then they'll also have Navi 48 in laptop, which I do think AMD is going to try to get laptop market share again with that. We'll see if anyone buys their discrete cards in laptops, but do you think that will be a real, asset to have 16 gigabytes in high-end AMD laptops versus 12 gigabytes for some of NVIDIA's high-end laptops? Or do you think
it'll motivate some people to buy it, I'm sure, over the 5070 Ti laptop, because cards need to be a tongue twister now when you say them. But I mean, I think the discussion will be pretty similar to what we're having right now with the 7900 XT and the 4070 Super, 4070 Ti Super, where people still discuss like, well, this has more RAM, but people still want the Nvidia thing over the AMD thing, and I think that's even stronger in laptops. So,
it is.
I mean, I think people.
You think it's enough? They'll get away with it.
Yeah, I think the 5070 Ti laptop edition would probably still be more sought after, and I'm sure more OEMs will put it in their laptops anyways, because Nvidia has completely captured the laptop market.
Laptop GPU market.
Yeah.
Soldier Killer 78 writes in and says, what is the best way at the moment to get a 16 gigabyte VRAM GPU in a laptop? Would you say an RTX 3080 16 gigabyte is still worth it to get even when it's a used unit? Used laptops I'm a little more apprehensive to get them than I am used pretty much anything else, just because you don't know which component could break. And once one motherboard, graphics card, CPU, sometimes RAM if it's soldered. I mean, every time RAM if it's soldered. But like if any of those components break, the whole thing's screwed. So I mean, but I will say I remember I was looking around at laptops like half a year ago before I decided, I'm just going to wait for the APUs to come out, like Hawkpoint and later, which I did. And I kept thinking to myself, the 3080 16 gigabyte, which is really a 3070 Ti in a laptop with 16 gigabytes. If you could get that for a bargain, I would choose that over a laptop, everything besides the laptop 4090. I mean, you're talking about, was that 3070 Ti versus the 4080 laptop is a 3070. I mean, a 4070 Ti basically, or a little weaker than that maybe. And then, of course, clocked lower, so weaker still. But where would that put that versus that? Yeah, I would make that trade. I would trade 12 for 16 gigabytes, even if it's less efficient in a laptop, simply because once we're getting to this tier anyways, you're not gaming on the go on this laptop. And if you want to, just undervolt the crap out of it. I just would want that RAM. So if it was a good deal, I would say absolutely I would get it. The problem is I'm just apprehensive at how many of them are excellent deals,
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would say, I guess I'm not sure how well reviewed it was, but the 7900M also exists. And from what I saw on the market, I don't know where you are, maybe it's different, but the 3080 laptop market was pretty expensive, and you could get something with the 7900M in it for cheaper than anything I found on like eBay or Amazon. And obviously, I think the best laptops card on the market is the 4090. So if you can spend $3,000 on a laptop, you can get that.
Well, it's interesting though. I wish I had a better CPU though. I'm on Newegg right now. I have a 3080 laptop here. It has a 5900 HS, so that's pre-rem bronze. So that's probably why it's so cheap. But it's $3,200. I'm not $3,200. It's $1,200. Okay. I don't know why my brain did that.
Okay, $1,200.
By the way, everyone should know my brain is a little fried from partying in Vegas over the weekend. So I may just completely say the wrong word every now and then. I'll try to correct myself. Please do so as well. But $1,200. But then it's like, okay, but let's break this down. Its CPU is a little weaker. This won't be as efficient. I don't know though. I think that is getting into the territory where I think that's a good deal if you need that level of performance for some reason in your laptop. But that's that makes me easily choose it over anything else.
Or if you specifically need it to have 16 gigabytes for some reason. And if that's the case, I mean, Strix is coming out relatively soon, so that might be a good option in the near future to have more than 16 gigs of RAM on a GPU.
Yeah,
although it's not GDDR5 or 6, I guess. But
the cheapest 4080 laptops I'm finding here are like $1,900. Of course, what CPU does this have? It has Raptor Lake. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess actually, if you need that GPU specifically to do something on the go, I actually think the 3080 laptop editions are a steal if you can get them for like $1,200. But it better be for that,
Yeah, and I did a little looking into like the 7900M for this question too, and the 7900M like nominally exists, but it's only in a few models, and I guess that's the nature of all of these laptops. But like Notebook Checks testing found that it lasted like 90 minutes on browsing Google. So I don't know if I could recommend that. If there's a better model, maybe that's an option too. But if you don't want to go all out and spend $3,000 plus on a 4090 a 4090 mobile laptop.
All right. Let us move on to the next one here. Story number 2. Hardware Unboxed, Moore's Law is dead, and Hardware Lux smoke out MSI's Nvidia lean, now focusing on RTX. A week and a half ago, Hardware Unboxed tweeted, "Did I miss this story? MSI has been completely removed from AMD's Radeon 7000 series. All existing products have been discontinued, and they never released a 7700 XT or 7800 XT, as far as I can tell. This all seems to have happened very quietly." Then after that, I tweeted that Steve wasn't crazy, and that as far as I know, there is smoke to this fire, and that I was actually warned about this around when MSI got approval for that Slim series. I remember back then being told by some of my contacts, and I think I probably talked about it in some Broken Silicons or something, that this Slim series happening with MSI right as the 7800 XT launches with no MSI models, not a coincidence at all. And then after those tweets, Hardware Lux got confirmation directly from MSI saying, I quote, "In graphics cards, our focus right now is on RTX cards. Still, working with AMD is very important to us. We see good development in motherboards." So there you go. MSI has picked a side in the GPU wars. We know Nvidia can be a cruel mistress from what happened with EVGA, but perhaps EVGA's resignation on continuing their relationship with Nvidia as well as their whole GPU business is exactly the reason why MSI chose to snub Radeon. So I think this definitely deserved its own story here. This is pretty big that they just openly said, "We like your motherboards, but we're kind of done with your graphics cards."
Yeah, I mean, one that speaks to where MSI thinks the market's going, but also it might also speak to the vacuum that EVGA still potentially potentially left, and MSI might just see, well, hey, we could dedicate all of our efforts to just trying to become or partially fill what EVGA used to do.
That's a good point.
Yeah, EVGA was a huge company.
And like, let's say Nvidia controls 70% of the graphics market, and then EVGA was selling, even in some regions, like let's say half or even 40% of those cards. It's a point where if you just pivot to Nvidia more, you're almost getting the amount of market that AMD is total. Like, not really, but it might be easier and it might be more consistent. I will point this out too. I don't remember if there's reader mail later in here. I think there's, where I touch on this again, but I think it's weird too that like I put this out there in the last live stream. I think I touched on it in the previous video as well, that like I did actually reach out to people, what's going on with laptops. I just put out this video that says, like, as far as I can tell, OEMs really are, just like I warned last year, like it's happening. They really are switching to AMD for laptops. Is this what you're seeing? And someone gave me access to like some distributor database of like what they're offering. And basically what it showed is that, a lot of laptop makers are pivoting to AMD, like specifically, unsurprisingly, like I don't think you need a source to know this, but Lenovo and HP are like way ramping up how many AMD laptops they offer. Like they might even get to parity with Intel this year, which is nuts to say that out loud. Meanwhile, I was told, Dell, not, what a surprise, Dell's with Intel. But curiously, MSI was, I wouldn't say shifting towards Intel so much as still barely carrying AMD. And so I will say, I think some people are saying, because I've seen some hot takes out there, well, of course they are. It's common sense. Yeah, but it's not common sense to bet on Intel and CPU right now. It's not.
No.
And it's not even just like where someone would say, well, but everyone still recommends Intel behind it. No, I like Lenovo wants to be done with Intel, guys. Like this is not common sense that, you should be still betting on Intel and CPU. So I don't know. I think there's more to this personally. And you shouldn't assume that MSI, well, let me get this reader mail here. Essie is ready for spring. She's excited to get outside and start carrying around entire tree branches that she just thinks are S-tier sticks, which really, they can't be that healthy for her, although Can't imagine they're really any more unhealthy than the typical ramen people are eating on a busy workday. Well, of course that is, unless they eat Vite Ramen. This piece of content is brought to you by Vite Ramen. Vite Ramen is a healthy, tasty, and shelf-stable food crafted by an American startup that offers tons of options for eating healthy, like their classic packages that make it easy to add protein and other ingredients of your choice, or also their Ramen Go packages that offer a healthy, microwavable option for those who truly only have a 15-minute lunch break when they are away from home. And I also need to take a second to promote their Nano Boost Vitality Powder as well. Seriously, this is a fantastic alternative to coffee that you'll find me drinking in many Broken Silicon episodes when I'm forced to record late at night, and I truly do believe it blows away their competition. You have to understand, I've been working with the people at Vite for years now, and I have a lot of freedom in what I can promote from their website. And out of the things they make, I have to say, it blows away the competition. This thing tastes great. It's easy to mix into water. You never has that sand-like texture their competitors often have. And so I really cannot recommend that enough, in addition to just basically everything on their website. Going to their website and buying something from Vite Ramen, that directly supports this channel, and it supports a sponsor that's been good to the Moore's Law is Dead team for many years. So I really do like their products, all of them, especially their ramen and Nano Boost Vitality Powder, and I can't recommend them enough. So support Moore's Law is Dead by supporting Vite today. Melodic Warrior and Jensen Wang write in, and they say, in the past, I had mentioned seeing MSI, this part of it's from Melodic Warrior, making less AMD products, and recently Hardware Unboxed posted that tweet. I got in touch with some folks and research online. It does seem like MSI is planning on quietly leaving AMD over time. Was there a legitimate reason, or are they simply trying to get closer to one manufacturer over another for lazy reasons? Well, from what I hear, though, AMD kind of did piss off MSI during the RDNA 2 era. Nvidia stockpiled the right types of RAM. If you made high-end Ampere graphics cards, they could use GDDR6X, which wasn't being used by anything else, so it was cheaper actually than GDDR6. So not only did AMD not stockpile as much RAM, but their RAM became more expensive than what Nvidia would give you in some of these bomb kits. And so they got into the situation where Nvidia is selling these 3080s for $2,000 with 10 gigabytes of cheaper RAM, and AMD is selling these 6900 XTs for $1,500 with 16 gigabytes of crazy expensive RAM. And then, AMD wasn't as good at consistently shipping graphics cards to partners sometimes. And I just think MSI just doesn't like AMD right now. And I kind of just think people underestimate how many decisions are made for human reasons. It's not always some realpolitik 4D chess move based on only data. Well, I do think the people in the relationship between MSI and AMD just isn't as good as with these other companies for some legitimate, but other just maybe emotional reasons. And I think that's a large part of it. But I will say this as well. Again, I wanted to bring up this reader mail now because I wanted to bring some of the notes I put for this full circle. Lenovo's making the opposite bet. HP is making the opposite bet. You see Sapphire getting excited about more and more launches from AMD. MSI is making the bet they think is right. That doesn't mean they're right, and it's not the bet a lot of other large companies, some companies much larger than them, are making.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how close of a relationship they would have had with MSI. Maybe MSI is one of the companies that or the AIB partners that they just don't have as close a relationship with. And yeah, if you're not shipping stuff consistently or can't consistently get shipments to them, or their sales are flaky with those products, I can get why MSI would be frustrated working with them. But I mean, it could all just come down to frustration, where a company like Sapphire, it works far more closely with them. So I doubt they would be as likely to get frustrated with AMD.
Mm-hmm. Right. But I guess I'm just saying too, I think you see some expansion into AMD graphics. And you see a lot of people, and again, I think it's worth pointing out, MSI's not shifting to AMD CPUs, which is against the market trend.
Yes.
So that tells you this is not just something happened to them. They just seem to not like AMD for some reason.
Yeah.
But I guess the only other thing I'd say is I've seen several comments like, is AMD going to stop making graphics cards? I don't know what channel suggested that. No.
I mean, how many AIBs make graphics cards, AMD graphics cards already?
FXX, Sapphire, ASRock, right? Doesn't ASRock make them now? Am I wrong?
Let me double check.
ASRock AMD GPU, right? Yeah, they do. Power color, of course. I'm sure MSI still does make them technically. And then there's other, like I think some OEM versions as well. Like, so there's a lot of people still making them, and I don't. Yeah, I think too, this idea of them can't. The IP they use to make these graphics cards is the same IP that's going into the PlayStation 5 Pro. Like Navi, like the PlayStation 5 Pro seems to use a modified something that pulls very heavily from Navi 48. And then you also see like they have AI versions of this cards. There's a lot of companies buying up 7900 XTXs in bulk for AI use. AMD is not going to stop making graphics cards, guys. I don't know who. MSI doesn't like them. Great, but they're also betting on Intel CPUs, so I don't think that tells you AMD screwed. All right, let us then, speaking of Intel, move on to the third story here. Intel baseline BIOS makes the i9-14900K lose performance, and Intel's reliability is now directly being called into question. All right, quoting here from a video from Hardware Unboxed, you shouldn't be seeing a significant reduction in performance. This is his video testing the new baseline BIOSes with 14900K. But that's assuming you have a board that still runs at 253 watts with the Intel baseline profile enabled as we were seeing on the Asus board. Looking at the 13th and 14th gen datasheet, you'll find that Intel's base spec for the 14900K is PL1 at 125 watts and PL2 at 253 watts, and neither Asus nor Gigabyte boards are running at that spec for their Intel baseline profile. So as usual, it seems as though none of Intel's board partners know what to do with their power specs, or rather, it's more of a case that they're really free to do whatever they want. If your CPU can't run at a sustained 253 watt, then it should be replaced by Intel. Anything short of that, and they've misled the customers, in our opinion. As expected, it sounds like Intel's passing the blame for something they've known about for many years now, have admitted publicly it is in-spec behavior. And then a tester on Chip allegedly has tested dozens of CPUs and found only 5 out of 10 Core i9 13900Ks and 2 out of 10 i9 14900K CPUs are stable in the auto profile on motherboards. And so there you go. We have known for years that Intel's base spec for their CPUs was nothing more than a piece of paper. For years, MOBO makers have pushed their stock settings to ever higher sustained TDPs. And for years, Intel did nothing, condoning the practice, and now we see the results. CPUs that cannot even reach those out-of-the-box settings while remaining stable, CPUs quickly degrading by the wattage pushed into them, and all in all, it was all in support of a futile effort to get at least some benchmark wins over AMD Ryzen, an endeavor that ultimately failed to even succeed last year. And I think this is something we've been covering for weeks, but it's getting even worse. I mean, what do you think, Dan?
It's I don't really know what to say other than, yeah, that's really bad. And I don't know how Intel can keep advertising their can keep advertising their performance specs if it's all just random nonsense, basically, at this point, because that's kind of what it seems to be turning into to me.
Mm-hmm. And I want to be clear why it almost seems like we're covering this 2 news episodes in a row. And I guess we are, but the story keeps evolving. Like the last time we covered it, I came in with quotes from some of my sources saying, no, we really are getting a lot of returns, and it has gotten worse every year for a while now. And that this really is going to become a much, much bigger deal. Me and you saying we don't know if we can recommend them anymore. Like, I remember we kind of ended that story, to my memory, with me asking you, can we even recommend these anymore? Is this the tiebreaker where it's just like kind of becoming a blanket don't buy Intel desktop CPUs? And I believe you said pretty much. Well, now 2 weeks later, we have Hardware Unboxed testing this. It's all over the place. It's all inconsistent. They've lost, I think, more performance with the baseline spec than me and you expected, right? I mean, 10 to 30% performance drops. That's nuts. And then on top of that, we have many, and I believe there are other people sounding this as well who have done some testing that like the idea that only a fifth of the CPUs you're shipping, are working at the agreed upon spec that you told everyone they will. That is so crazy that I don't know how you can recommend this generation at all.
No, and I mean, I think anybody that's still recommending anything from Intel at this point is just, I don't know, take a step back. Why are you recommending Intel at this point? Their CPUs don't work, and they're power hungry. Their according to Chip Hell, they're not even stable at what they should be stable at on paper. There's going to be a lawsuit over this at some point.
I mean, if it's really this, I should say,
if it's
at
that
least,
bad, yeah.
I'm just quoting one person. I think they tested for this test 10 of each. It's not like they did 1,000, but
there could, who knows? They could have.
But even if it was off by double, that would still suggest that possibly half of these CPUs can't meet spec.
Yeah. I mean, 10 is a relatively small data set, so you can't make huge conclusions, but you can probably, you can generally say that a sizable percentage of Intel CPUs aren't the spec that they claim to be.
Mm-hmm. And I want to be clear about one thing too. Like, it is both. It is not just that it's like, oh, well, whatever. It's still technically the best after you tweak it. And once you tweak it, you can get it to perform like it's in spec. And so it's still recommendable for some people. If that was the case, I wouldn't agree with you, but that is an argument with logical supporting points. It is also that they break. Like, I know, Dan, last time we talked about this, you said you saw that, I think there was an overclocker or a professional gamer. It stopped working. They switched CPUs. It started working. Like, these CPUs are also breaking. These things have been out not even half a year. Or I guess half a year. They've been out half a year and they're already breaking. And this is now. How many of these are going to end up breaking within 1 year? That is why you can't recommend it. Both, it doesn't do what they're telling you it's supposed to do, so they're just lying to you. And also, you're buying something that might break within a few months. And that's just ridiculous. When it doesn't do anything. It doesn't win multi-threading. It doesn't win gaming. It uses, it's the before we were trying to bend and contort ourselves like a game of Twister, what person could justify, but I do multitasking. It was always narrow wins here and there. And now it's gone. This is just, you can't recommend this anymore.
No, Intel needs to get its shit together. This is really bad. I don't really know what else to say other than, this is really bad.
Jensen Wang, CEO, Master AI Chef, writes in and says, might the 14900KS and similar Intel parts effectively be the new Pentium 3 1.13 gigahertz? And some notes were put in here from Carbon Crime. I'm just going to read. He says, for those who don't know, the too long didn't read story of the Pentium 3 1.13 gigahertz is that they wanted to compete with the OG Athlon. Sadly, the performance was a crapshoot with RAM bus, parts of the chipset being horrific. And then the 1.13 gigahertz Pentium was going to be a paper launch. And then even some review samples failed for reviewers who did stability testing. So usually reviews went out, but more thorough reviews consistently sounded alarm bells, and Intel just ended up having to recall the CPU itself. I doubt it gets quite that bad, but it does feel like we are halfway to it being that bad. Reviewers were able to run the CPU. It just seems like they break within 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, if they're consistently breaking that quickly, though, I mean,
if it gets recalled, it's de facto the same situation.
Yeah, I mean. It sounds like very close to a repeat of that situation.
Well, it's good to know that Intel's learning from their mistakes.
Yeah.
QH Freddy writes in. He says, it's clear AMD is strong in laptops and do-it-yourself. But do you have any clue as to how they're doing in desktop OEM side? Well, it depends what you mean by OEM. Because if you're an OEM, you're probably just going to buy up the same, not generally speaking. If you're Dell and you're making desktops like Alienware, you're probably going to mostly buy Intel if that's what you're doing for laptops. But I think where I want to answer this question is, I think in pre-builts, that's a place where AMD still has a lot of work to do. I mean, they're still buying them in decent numbers, but I find it so interesting how pre-builts, you feel like that would be in between do-it-yourself and what's going on with OEMs. But it almost feels like a lot of OEMs like Lenovo are switching to AMD faster than pre-builts are, and I don't know why. And I will say that still just seems like I think it seems like a stronghold for Intel, but actually maybe I do know why. I mean, from what I hear, Intel's relationship and the amount of just volume of salespeople they have to go reach out to every little pre-built company, that is still a huge leg up on AMD in many. I hear it's getting better, but I would say pre-builts is still a place where Intel seems to have a major advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly where that advantage comes from, but it's definitely there's definitely a weird streak with the pre-built, and the people that advertise pre-builts really, really loving Intel for some reason.
Well, I do think it's just the longevity of their relationships and the fact that they're smaller. Like, if you're talking to someone at purchasing in Lenovo, this guy or gal's making a lot of money. They're coming in. Their job is to just do this, make purchasing decisions. And then let's say you're talking to like Exotic PC or I don't know, right? And then you're just like, I don't know, and maybe I could be wrong, but whoever runs that, it's probably a way smaller team and a lot more of what they do. I speak as someone who is a small business owner myself, right? Whatever keeps things just rolling, I'm much more inclined to do that because I don't have a special assistant that can go, well, we need to talk to these other 100 sponsors or do this or do that. I try to do that as best I can. I get help from Carbon Cry. You help me as much as you can in there, although you're mostly on the podcast. So we do what we can, but I can suggest that if I was like a pre-built company of 100 people, like who do I even call at AMD? I mean, you're not Lenovo. AMD's not probably reaching out to you as fast. And I think you've been talking to the same Intel guy for like 10 years straight. The Intel guy's probably being extra nice lately because they know things are bad. And it's like, oh, well, you can get me all of these i9s on launch day and I can just build it. AMD, it's hard for us to set up a meeting because they have one guy handling all of the pre-builts in the Northwest for some reason. And it's just like, I think that's where Intel's advantage, a lot of it probably comes from that, if I had to guess. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure if you're a pre-built, having a small number of models is advantageous, especially depending on the size of your team. Because if you're like an ultra small pre-built company that has like 10 or 20 people on it, you want to build like 3 PCs maybe.
Mm-hmm. All right, let us then move on to story number 4. Intel and AMD report Q1 earnings. Indeed, Intel and AMD both reported their Q1 earnings in the past news cycle, and I would like to start by simply reading a couple of quotes. First one from Pat Gelsinger, the CEO of Intel. He said, "We are making steady progress against our priorities and delivered a solid quarter. Strong innovation across our client, edge, and data center portfolios drove double-digit revenue growth in Intel parts." And they also like to highlight that client was growing year over year by, I think, around 30%. Now, quoting Jean Hu, CFO of AMD, AMD started the year strong, delivering record quarterly data center segment revenue. In addition, we drove solid gross margin expansion. Moving forward, we are well positioned to continue driving revenue growth and margin improvement while investing in the large AI opportunities ahead. And then Lisa Su also reported nearly doubling Ryzen mobile sales year over year, showing they are taking ground in laptop this year, just like I said last year they were going to try to. So despite Intel trying to sound like they're in the same boat as AMD, which I think the way you can talk about, you look at how they word things. Like at Intel, they're like, another strong year, client grew year over year. They're trying to sound like they're in the same boat as AMD. But the literal numbers, to me, do not suggest they are in the same boat at all. And I don't actually see why you would think they are optimistic. Notice that AMD can point to billions of dollars in AI sales already and project billions more, whereas Intel just says we have AI and doesn't mention how that much money they're making from it that often. So I think Intel's sole bright spot remaining, in fact, is their client division, with data center and network margins stumbling to mere 15%. Client has 35%. And we've seen, data center go to negative recently. The client's the last place that have good margins. And meanwhile, AMD is taking rapid market share. Intel's up in sales 30% in client. AMD's almost doubled mobile sales. I think they have doubled client revenue. So to me, it looks like AMD is set to take a ton of client market share. And then in data center, they seem like, because especially of the MI300 and the launch of Zen 5 EPYC products this year, they might actually surpass Intel in data center revenue this year for the first time, I don't know, in history. I don't know. It's just hard for me to see how Intel will end this year looking remotely as good as AMD, even if their new reporting methods, which I don't know if you saw, Dan, they changed how they report on segments, and it made it look like there was not a drop in revenue, even though there was if they used the old reporting method for some of the segments. I don't know. I don't think it should be fooling anybody, although I did see some analysts seemingly get fooled by it. But I don't know. What do you think about this? Especially the rise in doubling mobile sales was crazy to see.
I mean, yeah, I think you can just attribute most of the growth that Intel's had at this point to just expansion of the industry as a whole.
Just if the market's going up or down or not.
Yeah, and AMD seems to legitimately be making a lot of headway in specific markets, especially laptop, like you say. Like they've doubled. I mean, I don't think anybody in the DIY market or desktop market that's serious is still recommending Intel CPUs. So I guess, yeah, the only place I could really see them making money still is like corporate laptop deals or something.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're just looking at the earnings call. Both of them seem to have a brief increase and then a dip afterwards, but AMD is pretty much completely recovered to where it was before earnings, and Intel is still down. So the market doesn't think Intel had a good earnings call either, even if it had a brief dip, boost in enthusiasm from people that got fooled by their report.
Yeah, which is maybe what happened. And it is interesting. Leo Waldock from Kit Guru reached out to me in an email. He watched my recent video about where I know a lot of the headlines from that video are probably my Blackwell leaks, but 3/4 of the video is just analyzing their earnings. And he asked me, I looked at Intel's earnings. They're like Q1 revenue from 2023. So Q1 2023 is different in this month's or this quarter's reporting than they reported a year ago. How is that possible?
Oh, yeah.
And I asked around, and the conclusion I came to is, well, yeah, but look at how they broke out some of these other segments. I think they just moved it around so that it's easier to report client is doing well. Like they moved some of the things that they were packing into client to hide it, so that now because they have to be able to report something's growing this year. And then I sent him a revenue chart, which I didn't send it to you before we started recording, Dan, but it basically shows Intel going up until 21 and then just down with brief ups consistently since then. And so it's like, well, you can pack the numbers however you want, but look at Intel quarterly revenue. And I sent him that chart and he's like, yeah, you can't hide from that. They are just, and so I don't know how long this is even going to work with them trying to do this. I mean, you look at the numbers, Intel's revenue is going down. AMD's doubled mobility sales. Client is the last place where Intel makes decent margin, and do it yourself is, I mean, it's just a disaster at this baseline fiasco. I hear instability issues plague Meteor Lake laptops right now. I don't know. I don't think this looks good. And I don't see how like 128 core Granite Rapids with Redwood Cove Plus is going to do shit to 192 core Zen 5 Turin.
Yeah, I mean, and just like looking at the numbers like on Intel's report, I mean, they have it. Their positive spin on profits is, well, we had a negative 12.5% operating margin last year, and this year it's only negative 8.4%. So
exactly,
we've got this.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just think, I put that video out. Zen 5 Strix is going to be Intel's reckoning. I stand by it. I think AMD at Computex, if they're smart, and I hear this is probably what they're going to do as well, they're going to just come out and they're going to say, they're just going to go crazy. I mean, they're just going to say Zen 5 fears its performance launching July or August or something. And they're going to say Epic launching August, September, up to 192 cores. And they're just going to say, oh, guess what? We're still not done. Here's Strix, like launching September or October, probably somewhere around there, I would guess. 12 cores, 16 CU, paired with these laptop GPUs. And then they're going to tease Strix Halo. And they're going to say all of this. And then they're going to say, by the way, all of these APUs have more tops than Lunar Lake's going to have, which isn't even going to be out yet by then. And it's just going to be, this is all happening, and we doubled Ryzen mobile sales. And people are going to probably go, yeah, Intel's screwed. I don't know how Intel's going to defend against this massive onslaught across all their stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't either. That's kind of been the narrative of the channel over the past 2 years.
6 months. Well, I mean, yeah, but I think that's like literally how I just phrased it is kind of what we've been saying for like the past 5 months. It's just like, it's over. They're delayed. Zen 5 is coming out late, but it's going to be launching everywhere. It's not going to be like Zen 4 launches right after Zen 3 Plus or something in laptop. Like they're just going for it. But yeah, I guess let's continue though. Speaking of going for it, let's go forward and talk about one of those products I just mentioned with story number 5. Moore's Law said leaks Strix Halo low-powered edition, while others confirmed the original leak from a year ago. Couldn't hear from HK EPC via video cards. Moving on to Strix Halo, the document leaked recently lists 16 cores and 32 threads based on the Zen 5 architecture with Strix Halo. Similarly, Strix, it will feature 1 megabyte per core, which means 16 megabytes of L2 cache and 32 megabytes of L3 per CCD. Presumably, this APU will feature 2 CCDs each with 8 Zen 5 cores. The Strix Halo will also feature 32 megabytes of mall cache, which should function similar to Infinity Cache, which I literally leaked that it was called mall cache a year ago, everybody. So, first of all, a ton of Strix leaks have been coming out confirming everything this channel's been saying for a year. And then also, I put out a leak during the Fox episode where we were talking about Strix Halo a lot. And I was like, you know what, let me pull up this document. And I noticed a detail in it that I hadn't leaked yet that I was like, I overlooked this. I should leak this. And I'm quoting myself here from then. It looks like they have a lot of options with Strix Halo with, yes, that's a 16-core 40 CU model. But I'm also noticing here they are planning for some customer an 8-core 40 CU Strix Halo model. That'd be probably for a gaming laptop then. And they also have a cut down SKU, Strix Halo LP with a 128-bit bus with 6 or 8 cores and 20 CUs, looking to beat 3050 in performance per watt in higher performance. So, yeah, I mean, there you go. There are now leaks emerging confirming the original Strix Halo reporting from a year ago. And during the last episode, I leaked that there will be more configurations out there. A 20 CU model that should have Infinity Cache, and also a gaming focused thin laptop configuration with 40 CUs. So what do you think of this, Dan? I thought that was kind of funny that it just came out of nowhere.
Well, I mean, Jesus, I think the 8-core 40 CU model looks really good as a gaming laptop, and it gives me hope that this is actually going to go into gaming laptops because the 16-core 40 CU model, I was always a little bit nervous wouldn't really make its way into the gaming market. But 8 cores, that's what you need for gaming these days. That's a pretty strong signal to me that that's what it's going to be used for. And then the cut down one obviously just sounds like it's the baby version of that. And I don't know what those 20 CUs will end up giving you in gaming performance, but I would imagine it would be not great necessarily, but at least, functional gaming.
And better than everything else around it, probably. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me see here. Bfish36 writes in and says, hypothetical question about Strix Halo. As you've been saying all along, recent leaks suggest a 256-bit memory controller with faster LPDDR5X support than Phoenix and Hawkpoint. I know it's not on die like the MacBook Pro, but given that the PS5 uses a 256-bit controller, should we be concerned with memory bandwidth, or is wattage and clock speed a more likely bottleneck for this? So I thought this was an interesting question. Yeah, they're using really fast LPDDR5X, and they have a 256-bit bus, but it's not GDDR6. Mm-hmm. Should we be concerned about this actually not being close to the PS5 because of that? And I just have to point out, it has 32 megabytes of Infinity Cache, people. So yes, it has slower RAM, but it has the same bus width as and we've already seen let me think about that, right? Like we've already seen the 7600 XT at a minimum, we should say, is close to a PS5. That is half the bus width, but then it has, 32 megabytes of Infinity Cache and faster RAM. So like double cut, if we were to make it a 256-bit 7600, but then cut the RAM speed in half, it would be getting pretty close to the bandwidth Strix Halo will have. So I think you're equaling at least 7600 XT bandwidth or slightly better overall, probably with some latency benefits. And because of that, and also because, remember, this is RDNA 3.5, not RDNA 3. I think as long as it has enough power, which I think 100 watts should be enough power, no, I think this will beat a 7600 XT, which means what? It will be around a PS5 or stronger. I think it has enough bandwidth. Having said that, I think they balanced it this way for a reason. I do think we have to understand. Well, yeah, I think they would have done it that way for a reason. I think if they thought it was a complete waste, they wouldn't have given it 40 compute units. They would have given it 32 or something.
Yeah, and I mean, the bandwidth obviously will be a constraint. It will constrain it to some extent, but I don't think it's immediately obvious how much it will be a constraint until you actually see how it performs. Because Who knows? I mean, it's a newer architecture. It has more CUs than the PS5. At the correct power draw, I could easily see it beating a PS5.
Yeah, I think easily. So I think it looks balanced enough to me. I'm not really concerned about that. And then QH Freddy writes in. He says, I think it's really generous to expect Strix Halo to be more efficient than Nvidia's normally clocked, so not the 4050 laptop at 120 watt equivalent, but Blackwell parts in general. I really do think it bears echoing that the important part of such a mega APU is really that it is going to undercut similar performing dedicated graphics GPUs. Any DGPU it can reasonably compete with isn't ever going to be powerful enough for such an APU to be mind-blowing performance-wise. So, yeah, I guess he's saying, like, it's similar die-size GPUs. It's just going to be cheaper, right? And that's why it's a big deal. I somewhat agree, but I think what QH Freddy's referencing is my original Strix Halo leak a year ago. I have documents that compared it to the 4070 laptop edition, and I was like, oh, it looks like it could be a lot more efficient than that. That now we know it's launching next to Blackwell, though. So now that it's compared to Blackwell, it'll be less impressive. But just know that, QH Freddy, when I said it'll be more efficient, I was comparing it to Lovelace and like Intel stuff at the time. Now that it's delayed, I agree its efficiency, at least under heavy load, will probably be less impressive than we were hoping, because it's coming out later. Having said that, though, I do think that the Fox made some really good points about bus width efficiency and so forth over like a 256-bit bus with lower RAM speeds dynamically and infinity cache. And I think we have to remember that, like, when we compare these APUs so far to like dedicated graphics cards, like, Hawk Point to a 1650, which, 1650 is not even really a good example because it's on such an older node. But like that, all of the times that AMD manages to make those APUs perform like these dedicated cards, they're typically like pushing them really hard at high clock speeds, bandwidth bottlenecked. That's not the case with Strix Halo. For the first time ever, finally, we're seeing them throw some infinity cache in there and use a wider bus. And the Fox brought up some really good points. Like, so if you push them really hard, yes, Blackwell will probably be more efficient. But if there's a capped frame rate, think of this. Is the RAM speed going to dynamically go up and down possibly sometimes with it? And if it does before, that's just less performance. But now we have infinity cache might make up for some of that if it's not at 100% utilization. In addition to that, just a wider bus tends to be more efficient in general as well. So I don't know. I just think that's worth pointing out that, like, so far we haven't seen AMD's APUs really prove they're more efficient, but they need super fast RAM and to be clocked super fast. So they just throw efficiency away anyways. And I suspect Strix Halo does some stuff while it's operating to save on energy that they just didn't do before with APUs. But we're going to have to see. But I wouldn't just, does it make sense what I'm saying?
I mean, generally what you're saying makes sense to me. I mean, the two things I'd say is, I guess I'm not sure at this level of power draw if that's still the case. But I mean, AMD tends to be the less efficient architecture, although at 100 watts, I might be wrong about that. And also Blackwell, I think, is a more advanced architecture than AMD's, or than RDNA 3.5. So those two things are working against Strix as far as efficiency goes.
But yeah, so I don't know. I think we're going to have to see. And I think a large part of why it would be more efficient is just by virtue of, like, it just has the CPU on the APU, and half of the inefficiency you often see is just when you have two devices, they're just using more energy. So
yeah, that could be the counterbalancing thing is, maybe the GPU tile is slightly less efficient than Blackwell at equivalent performance, but maybe the overall package with Blackwell and, I don't know, probably an AMD CPU is less efficient than the APU.
We'll have to see, though, because I do know Jared's Tech did a test at some point where he found that if you're pushing it super hard, a Lovelace like 4060 plus an AMD CPU actually doesn't really act that much less efficiently if you cap it at the exact same settings. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. But I think I've been saying that more recently a lot, or I've been saying that a lot more recently, QH Freddy, that really where I think Strix Halo is going to crush it is if they get aggressive with like Strix Halo low power and like, hey, there's not a lot of them, but this is the model that needs one cooling fan, one heat sink, and we can put this in an $800 laptop or something. And Nvidia has nothing to compete with this while having zero VRAM constraints. And then, in the top end, they can give it comparatively unlimited RAM. I think that's where it's going to be at its best, is undercutting and doing that. But I still suspect in some scenarios there may be some efficiency benefits that we may not just be privy to yet, that these would be the things AMD wouldn't want to tell anyone about, because OEMs don't need to know. They don't want them to leak it, because they will leak it, as you know from my channel. All right, let us now move on then to the final story. All Jessie wants is for Maurice to play with her more often, but unfortunately, he just does not give out playtime or kisses for as low of a rate as she does. And I think she's just going to have to deal with that. But do you know what you don't have to deal with? Paying too much for Microsoft software if you go to cdkeyoffer.com. This piece of content is sponsored by cdkeyoffer.com. Whether it's Microsoft operating systems, Office products, or even many of the latest games, cdkeyoffer.com provides PC gamers with a product this community deserves. Amongst endlessly elevating component costs, fair pricing on Microsoft keys is one thing that we at least should get, I think. And the Moore's Law is Dead team has been working with cdkeyoffer.com for a very long time. And that's because they're good to me, good to Dan, good to about a dozen family members of friends of mine that have used their services. And they've been really, really good, most importantly, to the Moore's Law is Dead community. So support this channel by using offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% off Microsoft software, or you can also use Die Shrink to save 3% off everything else on the website, like games. Using either of those codes really helps the channel a ton, and it helps save you money. So use those codes BrokenSilicon and Die Shrink at cdkeyoffer.com today. Story number 6. TSMC 2nm is 10 to 30% better than N3, and N4C is just cheaper N4P. Right? Quoting here from Anantech, when it comes to timing, TSMC's N2 is set to enter risk production in 2025 and high volume manufacturing in the second half of 2025. So it looks like we are going to see N2 chips in retail devices 2026. Compared to N3E, TSMC expects N2 to increase performance by 10 to 15% at the same power, or reduce power consumption by 25 to 30% at the same frequency and complexity. As for chip density, the foundry is looking at a 15% density increase. That's not very big compared to the previous ones, which is a good degree of scaling by contemporary standards, I guess, but that's not like, 12 to 5 nanometer or something. Anyways, TSMC affirmed its cautious approach, which is contrasted with Samsung's tendency to move fast, even if it breaks their own nodes, and Intel's frantic attempt to catch up and overtake in a single leap with 20A by affirming only 2 big improvements for their N2 node: GAA FET transistor structure, similar to the transition to FinFET, and then improved middle layer capacitors. That's something that Asianometry, when he was on recently, talked about as well, is that N2 is going to be one to watch, because this is kind of like a 7 nanometer or 16 nanometer moment where this is new, like this is, or actually really like a 16 nanometer moment. This is new, like actually new stuff here. So it might have some benefits that we weren't accounting for. But then continuing from another Anantech article, TSMC's N4C process belongs to the company's 5 nanometer class family of fab nodes and is a superset of the N4P, the most advanced technology in that family. In a bid to further bring down 5 nanometer manufacturing costs for TSMC, they're implementing several changes for N4C, including re-architecting their standard cell and SRAM cells, changing some design rules, and reducing the number of masking layers. As a result of these improvements, the company expects N4C to achieve both smaller die sizes as well as a reduction in production complexity, which in turn will bring down die costs by up to 8.5%. Furthermore, the same wafer level defect density rate as N4P. N4P stands to offer even higher functional yields thanks to that die area reduction. So yeah, they're basically arguing not only is it cheaper, you could argue it's just kind of better. But so yeah, instead of focusing mostly on top performance like their competitors, TSMC is also developing older or finished nodes to offer specialized alternatives. In fact, N4C can be looked at as a spiritual successor to 6 nanometer, which was a modest performance density improvement, but a significantly reduced cost as well that really made it popular. All right, so there we go. I think this is interesting, seeing confirmation of N2, which is a bigger leap than a half leap, but it is not as big as some of the bigger ones. But I think it's an important one to watch because if it goes well, this is the next family of technologies, like FinFET was. And then they also announced N4C, which I think is probably going to be used by a ton of stuff. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully N4C has a place to in not even lower end products necessarily, but go into products and drive down cost a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I guess it's good they had both N4C and N2, so they have a more positive story to report rather than a N2 is a meager advancement over N4P. I'm forgetting all of the nodes
and over N3P.
Oh yeah,
no one really uses.
Apple did, right?
They're using I don't think they're using like the good 3 nanometer yet.
Oh, they're not. Oh, so yeah.
Honestly, from what I'm hearing, we'll see. 3 nanometer is obviously going to be used by a lot of things. It almost to me feels like in the short term, people are just pivoting to more 4 nanometer and just wanting to jump to 2 nanometer because of the issues 3 nanometer had.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I have to say about this. I'm excited that N4C exists because the problem that TSMC's, I don't think it's a problem for them, but the problem they pose for the market is that they can kind of just keep increasing wafer prices as they get to new nodes because they're so sought after.
Mm-hmm.
And having something other than their most advanced node that's still pretty advanced is needed.
Mm-hmm. Which is important to point out too, because I think, we saw Intel's disastrous foundry earnings. And it's like, I think people keep forgetting, like, if Intel's close to TSMC, they'll have to get some business at their foundries. And why? I mean, just use N4C. It's way cheaper than Intel. And even if it was worse than Intel's 20A or something, or 18A, whatever, if 20% worse, costs half as much, and we know it will work.
Yeah, I mean, if Intel is going to try to command a premium price there's no reason that you would go to them.
Yeah, I don't have much else to add to the 2 nanometer side, except that I do want to say that I'll hint, like, I'm hearing, and it might be part of a video I'm going to put out this week or within a couple weeks, but I'm hearing people at AMD seem to like that 2 nanometer node. So I'm actually becoming a bit optimistic on this one as maybe being less rocky than 3 nanometer. But that's what I think now. We'll see, Techno writes in and says, what devices do we expect will use the cheaper TSMC N4C node? Well, I mean, my initial answer that I wrote ahead of time was cheaper APUs, consoles, and budget GPUs. But rereading this again, I don't know, probably most things pretty soon, right? I mean,
yeah, it could be anything. Like, I guess I don't know what like AMD will be on with their new generation of GPUs, but I don't know why it couldn't be N4C rather than like N2 or something.
Yeah, I mean, and it says that, I looked it up, and this is kind of like a mid 2025 thing, I believe, or early 2025 and later thing. So I would
not that then.
So, I would say Blackwell doesn't seem to be using it or some version of it, and probably not RDNA 4. Although if it ends up coming out next year instead of this year, like a couple sources to tell me could happen, I think we'll know maybe AMD's delaying it to use the cheaper, better node. But I think by the time we get to late next year, you're probably going to see like N3X, N3P high-end devices and some early N2, and then everything just go to N4C. So I think long-term, I mean, what we use this? Anything cheaper. Anything. Like, this will be great for like maybe like Sonoma Valley or a Sonoma Valley successor, some sort of, all of the cheaper APUs, budget GPUs. I think we're going to see a lot of the lower end of some lineups use this.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't see why it would only go in budget stuff. Thinking about it more,
yeah, like obviously the best of the best could probably get a better N4PX, but it's like, no, I think actually they'll probably just be on 2 nanometer by then. So I think a lot of stuff will, unless it needs to be the best. All right, let us then move on to the wrap up. These are the final stories that we didn't think it deserved their own story, but we thought were definitely worth mentioning. Something definitely worth mentioning here at the top. Did you watch the AMD 40th anniversary video, Dan?
Yeah, I looked through it.
It's only 8 minutes long, And it's pretty funny because it's from 2009 and they just remastered it in 4K with Ryzen AI and then posted this for their 55th anniversary, which I'm going to say I think it was a brilliant marketing move.
Hey, Tom, the AI PC is going to take over the world, so you need to show how good you can remaster something with AI.
Well, but I also think it's funny because I know they're either going to be working on a 55th or a 60th anniversary. They might even have one coming or something. But I think it's funny to just drop this just to remind everybody how far they've come and how they really haven't, they would probably argue, changed in their core like ethics and stuff as a company. It's just, and it just seeing Jensen Wang there, of course, too. Just like, go for it, AMD. I loved working there.
And it's also just kind of funny watching back on the 2009 design philosophy or graphics design philosophy and how much that changes over. If we're really looking at it, not that long of a course of time.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That was funny, too. I was sitting next to my girlfriend. I was watching. I'm like, look at this 2000s editing. This is hilarious. Like, you can just tell.
Oh, yeah, I know. Like, yeah. the little, like, what is it? Like, timeline scroll thing is just, yep, that's very junior high days to me.
Yeah, but so I don't have much else to say about this. But I thought, this was something they clearly put out in 2009, really before there was as much sharing on the internet. And then they decided to remaster it and just kind of surprise drop it. One of the most brilliant marketing moves I've ever seen, because they are both, oh, look at what AI can do. They're doing that. But then they're also kind of like humble bragging. They're like, they're letting people brag for AMD, which they're saying, look how goofy we were back then, and then letting people come to the conclusion themselves, oh wow, they're such a different company, without jumping out and saying we're now the best. They're letting people say it themselves. I just thought it was such a funny but very intelligent thing to do. Also, okay, so moving on, we also have and I think this is interesting here because this has been floating around, I think, for a week or two, or maybe 3 weeks, like the AMD EPYC 4004 16 core. So this is a Vcache AM5 EPYC product, but it's emerging that this has all Vcache cores.
That isn't
so 16. So I don't know. I will say, like, that's the kind of thing. I have a more compact PC. I just want all Vcache. So I have zero worries about which core it uses mattering. And I don't care if it's clocked 10% lower. I have a compact PC. I'll take the power savings. It makes me wonder, like, if I could ever get there could ever be good deals on something like this with like a Zen 5 version. My short-term answer is no. But that would be maybe some kind of future dream PC, is something like that, because that's what I really want. All right, moving on.
Rather expensive on eBay.
I know, but I think isn't it just showing up on eBay before they're selling it? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's part of why it's expensive. That is weird. All right. Well, this will be funny though, seeing what AMD charges for that themselves, though, because they argued that the 7950 X3D had only one Vcache CCD because it wouldn't benefit gamers. And it's like, okay, well, so then 2 Vcache should be that much more expensive. It's probably going to be triple the price or something. But all right, Intel Arrow Lake and naming schema examples leak. That's how I decided to name this. I mean, there's been people talking about, it might be 5.5 gigahertz. I mean, this is the type of stuff with Arrow Lake that I think we've been talking about for a long time. But I wanted to include it in the wrap up just because it, like, the Intel Core Ultra 9 285K. I don't know. Why can they not just keep i9? You can change the part after it, but it's just
because
there it is. Core Ultra.
Yeah, I have nothing really to add to it. Like, yep, good. They're importing their awful laptop CPU names to the desktop.
All right, so this one's actually interesting. This was pointed out to me by Carbon Cry. There's something called Copperlink, which is basically just better Oculink coming out eventually. And I was looking at the bandwidth this thing offers. It says Copperlink. They'll be available with ×4, ×8, and ×16 extensions. I mean, this is going to hit levels of bandwidth that this is, here we go. Like, this makes me wonder if I should wait. I mean, it won't really be ubiquitous or even really a thing probably until next year. But I keep thinking, like, I don't know, man, maybe just getting a decent like Zen 6 APU laptop and then getting an enclosure for a 5090, 4090 or something, I might just do that eventually here. Like, because this is going to get to a point where you don't have those performance drops. And that would just be amazing.
I mean, it could. Yeah, I mean, this could be the
It's
thing that
almost
makes
there already.
This could be the thing that actually makes what eGPUs viable.
Mm-hmm. Well, and viable in a way that it doesn't feel like you're making a bunch of trade-offs. You're just doing the smart thing by using an eGPU with a laptop.
Yeah.
I don't have much to add to this, and it's something I think we all expected here. Let me see here. Oh my God. I'm just realizing this was just updated.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up to you.
Well, we are going to skip ahead then. I'm not even going to mention it. And in fact, I will delete it from the script now. God. We'll just say someone misquoted some people, or it's reporting on some of these websites.
Somebody misquoted an opinion as a leak.
Yeah, I've never seen that happen before at this channel or 100 other ones. But all right, moving on. Sony buying Paramount. Did you look at this?
Yeah, I mean, they're in discussion to buy Paramount. I don't know how much that will affect gaming because Paramount's not involved in gaming, to my knowledge, are they?
Not really. I mean, who knows? I'm sure they're making some game versions of some things they make, but outside of that,
maybe we'll get more SpongeBob games on Sony, Tom.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe that will replace Spyro finally. But I don't know that I have much to say about this, except that I don't know why we need these companies to keep becoming bigger. I don't know if you have any thoughts besides that.
No, I mean, I'm not exactly a fan of that, but, that's just the way the world is moving towards. So, hip hip hooray for Sony buying Paramount, probably, or possibly.
I wonder what do you think the motivation would be? You think they're going to try to do some synergy with like PlayStation, like Amazon does with their TV shows and movies with something that used to be something that sold books online?
The biggest thing I could think that and how it could impact PlayStation is maybe like Sony's involved in a bunch of TV production now. Maybe they're trying to make like Paramount
their way
Plus,
to get into that. Yeah.
Maybe they're trying to make like Paramount Plus their home for television or something. Because I mean, they had The Last of Us on HBO, but I don't know if I don't know if HBO wants to turn into the Sony network where they have like what games are they trying to turn into shows right now? There's Ghost of Tsushima, God of War. I think there's others. Those are the two that I've heard most about, though. So I mean, I could.
There's a Twisted Metal show, I believe.
Oh yeah, there was a Twisted Metal show. I never watched that, but.
Oh man, do you think if they bought Paramount Plus, do you think they'd change the name of Paramount Plus? Number one is a question, I guess. And then number two, do you think they would rip The Last of Us off of HBO and put it on there?
I'd be surprised if they took The Last of Us from HBO, but I guess you never know. Because who knows what contracts were signed, that could be like a deal in perpetuity or something.
I also have here that it looks like Europe may be moving. I read this article. I think that the headline is a little more inflammatory than how much has already happened. But there are early rumblings that Europe may be moving to ban TikTok as well. I don't have much to say to discuss that, but.
Well, yeah. I mean, if Europe moved and it's a similar policy that like the U.S. is trying to pass, I think that would kind of force ByteDance into divesting because... I mean, there's the argument that, okay, we lose the U.S. market, but there's still a huge market in Europe and the rest of the world. But with both Europe and the U.S. gone, I think TikTok would be kind of screwed.
All right. And then finally, and I saw this while I was on the airplane, Nvidia is now advertising premium AI PCs. And their advertising aggressively makes fun of like the 50 tops as being anything to brag about.
I think it's kind of funny, but
yeah, I do think this is something that you're going to see more and more from Nvidia is until they have their own APU or their own deal to have it. Like they're going to start saying, oh, you want an AI PC? Well, then you want an Nvidia GPU in your laptop. The one thing I would suggest, though, is I would want to see some benchmarking. The problem is this stuff is so new. It's like, I was talking about this in the live stream. It's like, well, if you want this level of AI performance in Hawkpoint, that's what makes it. But of course, I don't even really know if it's used with anything yet. But like once it is used, I think by the end of the year, there will be some standard apps that use it some that might be easy to test. I would like to see some testing with laptops where it's like, okay, so Strix has like 50 tops. a basic NVIDIA GPU can have hundreds of tops. I would like to see if there could be some way NVIDIA could tweak these GPUs so that when you're using it for AI, it doesn't suck like 40 watts of energy. Like, can it just suck a few watts so that you don't even really notice that it has a DGPU? Is it like not less efficient? Because from what I've been told is there's kind of sometimes a latency issue because you have everything going on typically in a laptop in the APU until you need the GPU to save energy. And then when it needs it, it fires it up. Well, if it's a game, who cares? What is that? Not even a half a second delay to fire up the game, use the GPU. But if you're doing something with AI where you just want to quickly read someone's face, that might add that extra little hiccup.
No, that's true, yeah.
And, I'd like to see some testing with that. I would also like to see some testing of like when it does do that. Is it just, like, because I've been warned it could do this, just bursting to like 30 watts of usage. I know it's not for very long, but there goes a percent of battery life every time you do it.
Annoying.
And it's like, again, I keep thinking like when people say, do you think they're going to put an AI engine in like the Zen 5 IO die or something? I'm like, I don't know. Like if you have why would you need that in a desktop? You'll have a dedicated GPU, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in a laptop, I would like to see more testing to like really see if NVIDIA can easily do this or not,
I mean, yeah, that's a worthy concern if it just starts sucking energy whenever you try to do unlock your screen with your face or something.
And I would also argue like maybe these low usage or like not low footprint, but like just low requirement AI tasks. Like if you think about it, like that might matter far more to have lower latency and use less energy, because like how many things are even going to be using AI? Will anything be using it that's really stressful unless you're training models? I don't know. That's the type of testing I would want to see to counter this. But I mean, they're certainly free to say this. A basic NVIDIA GPU is a lot more tops on paper than, an NPU.
But do you need more than 50 tops as the average person?
Exactly. Because like what apps are even out there that use anything unless you're doing crazy AI, like real stuff? And at that point, it's like, well, okay, but it's not really the same conversation then. All right, let us then move on to the final reader mails. Crass writes in. He says the VRAM copium has to stop. The 1080 Ti had 11 gigabytes of VRAM for $700 in the spring of 2017. That would be 7 years ago this month. I agree. The 5060, we said it. I mean, I'm just saying it. 4060 was hard for me to recommend, but I could see the argument below $300. It's done. Like these 8 gigabyte cards, it's getting to the point where I would almost recommend an APU just because it's smoother to use with, more RAM. QH Freddy writes in. He says, when will the HBM hopium end?
When you pry the HBM from my cold, dead hands.
I feel like I'm talking to Carbon Cry right now. But no.
I don't expect it to be in any like normal consumer GPU anytime soon. I mean, maybe it will show up at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that there was a question in the live stream, and I feel like just every few pieces of content, whether it's a live stream, a die shrink, or a broken silicon, that type of long form content, there's at least one question of when will we see HBM and GPUs again? And then what I explained in the live stream was, guys, to my memory, like 4 gigabytes of HBM with the Fury series would cost, I believe, like twice as much or more of the RAM that was in this 980 Ti. So that was back then. And I don't remember what God, what did they? I think it was like $50 per 4 gigabytes. It's like kind of the quote or something. And that I think that's when it was getting cheaper with Vega. So from what I've heard, HBM is only getting more expensive, and GDDR has gotten less expensive than a few years ago. So think of this: if you can get a gigabyte of GDDR6 for $7, or you have to pay like $30 for a gigabyte of HBM. And also, everything using AI is buying up HBM, so you might be supply constrained. Mm-hmm. Why would you use it? And I just don't see it happening. I think HBM is basically out of consumer for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I mean, if it ever gets cheaper again, maybe it will be viable. But I think GDDR is fine for what it's used for.
Mm-hmm. And now GDDR7's coming out. I don't see it, TMC Paint writes in and he says, howdy, would you wager a top RDNA 4 graphics card that its ray tracing performance will match or beat that of the RTX 4080? No, I'm not ready to bet that, mostly just for die size reasons. Like, that'd be such an insane accomplishment with it being around 300 millimeters squared, which is what I expect. That maybe a little smaller, maybe a little bigger, like, so between like 260 and 350 millimeters squared, so smaller than the 4080, and I still use a GDDR6 with less bandwidth, almost the same node. I don't think so. I would certainly not bet that. If they do that, though, Nvidia should be terrified.
Yeah, I mean, that would mean AMD's finally figured it out, but I mean, I'm hoping to see some gains in
figured it out without using a bunch of die space.
Yeah. I'm hoping that they make some gains in ray tracing, though, next generation, because
I expect big gains.
I think it's starting to get bad if they don't.
Yeah, I expect big gains, especially, frankly, just from what I've seen with the PlayStation 5 Pro leaks this channel's put out, which have now, of course, been proven by Sony to be correct. Thank you, Sony, for confirming they're true by pulling that video. But, the stuff talked in there, it seemed like at least, to my memory, like a 20 to 50% uplift. And that's pretty big. That's still not probably where Lovelace is, but it does seem like it's getting there. But I'd still say, just think of it. The 4080 uses faster RAM. The 4080 uses more power. The 4080 uses more silicon. For common sense reasons, I don't think we should expect that.
Yeah.
Falto writes in, he says, it really surprises me to hear that time and time again, upscaling methods are able to give us better image quality than native resolution. For example, many DLSS games look better with it on than native. And now Stellar Blade, the newest PS5 game, there is a mode that uses temporal upscaling to get a 4K image, and it looks better than the resolution mode that runs the game at native 4K. Source Digital Foundry's video on the game. How exactly is this possible? What does this mean going forward? Half of it is I think games are now built to use upscaling. And the other half is maybe they work.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that it can do that because it doesn't intuitively make sense. But yeah, I mean, if games are built more and more to use upscaling to the point where they tell you don't turn upscaling off, there might be a reason for it.
Now, Carbon Cry did put a note in here that there is a couple of things that can flicker, like in the distance or something, with the upscaling method. So there's still probably more artifacts. It just looks sharper, and it is a large part of it is the native AA in the game. The second DLSS got good, and the second AMD put out FSR 1, I just feel like a lot of engines and studios just gave up caring about AA as much. Like TAA still works well, but anything besides that, they don't care. Mm-hmm. And because of that, it's kind of a foregone conclusion too, that like native resolution is having less work put into it at this point as well. So, I mean, it is what it is. There's the optimistic way of putting it of like, well, it works. And there's the unoptimistic of like, well, I mean, they also don't make native look good anymore. But I mean, I do think this is a thing that, I mean, whether you like it or not, it's here to stay, people. Like this upscaling stuff works.
And I do just think sharpness in the image a lot of the time is what people perceive as higher quality.
Amiable Chief writes in. He says, Tom, with news of the FTC straight up banning non-compete clauses, what's your thoughts on who among Nvidia, AMD, and Intel will stand to gain or lose the most from this announcement? I kind of went back and forth because I added this to the script early on in the week, before the weekend. And I had my one answer, then I wrote it again. And I asked around, and I think most of the non-compete shit was 10 years ago, though. And I know someone's going to write it and say, I had a huge issue recently in this state with this. I'm not saying it was all gone, but I reached out to people at AMD, Nvidia, and Intel. And for the most part, it's like Intel may have been a little more aggressive. And I think Apple was really aggressive, but I think, California already got rid of it. And I think once that happened, a lot of the semiconductor companies started seeing the writing on the wall. And even if they had them, most of them were pretty watered down at this point to like less than 6 months or something. So at this point, I don't think it's going to really change much in the short term for any of them more than the other. It just cements that you can't do this anymore.
Yeah. And I guess I don't know how down the chain they would do non-compete clauses, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good development because non-compete clauses, I honestly don't even understand how they ever were legal. They're just blatantly anti-worker, but yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, they force you to think twice about leaving a company. Yeah, I could see the argument for them for like CEOs and
executives. I kind of get it, but if you're below like if you're below like executive, maybe you could even argue director, but it seems pretty blatantly anti-worker, because if you're like trying to force middle managers to not be able to jump from Intel to AMD or Nvidia or wherever, that's pretty bad.
Yeah. And again, it just makes it so that you would never want to leave a company in some places. And I think that I even saw the places that got rid of it, like it immediately showed more innovation and better wages. So, it's about time it's gone. All right. Compressed Earthblocks writes in and he says, "Hi, Tom and Dan. How do you feel about Helldivers 2 needing a PSN account and being removed from sale in countries that can't get that? I see a lot of dumb critiques about this, like people thinking you'll need PlayStation Plus, but I do see legitimate concerns with this, such as people who live in countries that can't have PlayStation Network." So this is interesting. This was actually brought up to me, Dan, at dinner when I was in Las Vegas by someone who was part of the bachelor party. And I was like, I didn't know that. And I'm like, when did it happen? He's like, this week. That'd be why I missed it. I've been busy.
I would bet Sony's they're going to go back on this, or someone's going to force them to go back on this, because this is, or at least honor refunds if you can no longer play it in the region you're in.
Oh, well, but bare minimum, that one, for sure.
I think Sony's going to look at that and they're going to be like, oh, shit, maybe we shouldn't do this. But
yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with adding it. I mean, maybe you'll add trophy support and stuff. But the problem I have is if this was there at launch, then people would have bought it and known, oh, I need PSM. It wasn't at launch. You can't do this bait and switch.
No, you can't do that. It's bullshit. I mean, I do think some of the I think some of the people that were insanely angry about this online, I bet a lot of them really, they're just annoyed that they have to make a PSN account now, and they're coming up with reasons why they're really mad. And it's because if you're in the Baltic states, you can't play this game anymore, which sucks if you're in the Baltic states, but I don't think that really affects an American.
Yeah. Now, this is where a bunch of people are going to jump in and say, in all caps, by a bunch, I mean 10, jump in and say, you're wrong. This affects me because of this. But I think, let's be clear, Dan. I think what you said is true. It does not affect most people, really. At the same time,
I'm not going to defend it because it's bad.
We're not defending it. I mean, I think you agree. This was not there at launch. This is bullshit. You can't do this. And if you can't play the game anymore, you deserve a refund.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know how many sales that's going to affect, but I doubt Sony wants to refund that $40. So I hope they go back on this within a week, because it is legitimately stupid.
Well, I mean, let me look at this, like, because it is so stupid. I'd almost wonder if we should check Helldivers to no longer.
Well, I mean, you have to sign into PSN.
No, I know, but I'm just checking PSN. Steam. Like I almost think we should double check this right now, in case they already reneged on this, because this just seems like such a fundamentally stupid thing to do that I wouldn't be surprised if by the time this podcast episode comes out, they already got rid of the requirement. Let me see. I don't know. Arrowhead said that they're talking solutions. So Arrowhead's already making it sound, at least, like there's going to be a change soon. So, okay. I wouldn't be surprised if when this comes out, they've already gotten rid of it. They don't want this to continue the news cycle, But I don't think we have anything else to say besides this is ridiculous and stupid. And if you can't play, you should get a refund. It should have been an optional thing. And then they should have said, you can now get trophies or something.
Wait, let me confirm this, Tom.
Oh, okay. Please. If there's a big change, double check it.
This is from a mod post on r/Helldivers from 10 minutes ago.
No way.
Yeah. This quoting Sony's PlayStation. Helldivers fans, we've heard your feedback on the Helldivers 2 account linkage update, the May 6th update, which would have required Steam and PlayStation Network account linking for new players and for current players beginning May 30th, will not be moving forward. We are still learning what is best for PC players, and your feedback has been invaluable.
So they're
removing that requirement.
I'm so glad. I'm like, this is such a dumb idea. I would think they want to fix this by Monday. Let's check, and it's just
So,
like right now. So make sure you
didn't-
send me that link.
Okay, I hadn't actually like read too much. I just saw that they added you had to link your PSN account, but apparently this update wasn't supposed to be passed until May 6th, and the new requirement wouldn't go into effect until May 30th. So nothing actually happened in the game yet. They just saw the patch notes and everybody got really pissed off.
Oh. Well, so then, all right, calm down. If you're, it looks like it's fixed before it became an issue. Again, the dumbest thing I've ever heard if they were going to do that, though.
Oh, yeah. Very stupid.
Make sure you send me that link, though, because I need to add that there. That's hilarious that it happened right while we were recording. Perfect timing, then. I guess it's good we recorded late this weekend.
Yeah. That's why we did it. Because we knew news would break as we were recording. Yeah.
Exactly. It's because we know. It's because Sony does things based on what we leak.
Yeah.
But that was the last reader mail, and I think it was an excellent one to end on. Dan, any final thoughts? Anything else to say? Anything else you want to expound on from the past 2 weeks of news?
I don't think so.
All right, well, I'm just going to end it here then. Thank you, everybody, for listening and for watching. Remember to like this video, comment for the algorithm, and share it. All that helps so much. Then also, please remember to subscribe to the Moore's Law Dead YouTube channel and ring the bell button. Subscribing does help us. It does help the algorithm. It does help us negotiate with sponsors to have less or put ads and less annoying parts of videos. Like, it really helps the channel a lot if you subscribe. And then, of course, the best way to help, of course, you can also support our sponsors, but then also is on Patreon. We just put out a new die shrink. We put them out every couple of weeks. They're ad-free, hour-long bonus pieces of content. We have patrons vote on the subjects of them. We cover things that we think maybe the YouTube algorithm would hate, but as far as we can tell, all of the fans want us to talk about. There's hundreds of those episodes out there if you join us right now for just $2 a month. And then, of course, you can ask us questions. There's other things at higher tiers. There's a Discord. So please support us on the Patreon. We really do need to start moving more and more to a grassroots support method. Like this channel was founded on, actually, is the majority of our income for a while there. And I think we need to go back to Patreon being the main source of income to avoid just whatever's going on with ad funding right now out there. And besides that, again, I guess that's it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And have a good week, everybody.
Goodbye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carmen Cry and Carrie Nosugad as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About/Support page. In the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie Nosugada as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong, we love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guests questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Full, Z-Jits, Daniel D, Aaron Close, Jan Rauner, Daniel Hyde, GZ Ziggy, Deke, Nicholas Buckner, MJB1, SNES Chalmers, Jem Ferreira, HowardForum.com, Valcom Olev, Jensen Wang, Gregorius Acker, Sarcastro, Evan Dingle, Andrew S, Chris Rich, Compressed Earthblocks, 3DS Boy 08, Hal Buma, Shredbird, Greg Wanchik, Holden Mobley, Benjamin Cannon, Jonathan, Samuel Malotz, Blake, Franco Frederic, Jordan Simkovic, Toka, Tulian Leaked, the Jake Dude 23, The Boss Haas, Jake Martin, Zlicky, Stephen Hart, Meat and Pork, Tim Robb, Ian Clifford, Travis Gooding, Stefan Chrysantine, Mad, Zuzu Taylor, Stephen Coates, Michael McGee, Greg, Patty Cakes, Amiable Chief, Tommy, Mark Mitchell, Neithra Zink, Aishud, Mark Rainmaker, James Anderson, Cole Addict, Judson N, Cameron, Wesley Sager, Henry Zhang, Michelle Pelt, D31337 Antics, Exapuma, Reginald Ari, T. Cottom, Game Since Reagan, Jeff Sedler, Loophole 35, Jamie Witters, JSMMH, Windstar, James I, Raider, Corey Leonard, Little Germany, Shay, Milton, Pulse Media, Melodic Warrior, Dave Schultz, Mac Daffy, Stephen Dick, Chuck Glidden, Brett Jones, Austin Haggerty, Justin Bustle, I-7-11700K, Joe Foot, My Sharona, Earth Taurus, Hardland, Slushbot, Jansen Angimas, Joseph Kelly, Samuel Park, Windwing, Himsa Gung, Tails 2299, Meal, Val Vega, John, Sisyphos 7771, Charles Russell, The Forbidden Juice, RB Racer, AC Bride Wright, Michael Cozy, Dr. J. Matt, Alex Vega, Free D, John Swin, Jola Martina, Kikum, Albert Gun, Solarized 80, Matthew Marlowe, Hudat 42, Penta Winta, Rowan McKickey, Cornster 671, Sprutnik, Jeffrey Gentleman, Angel of Cake, Omega Doge, Roger Webster, Ian, Paul Castro, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.